And hey guys, it's John. Welcome to June. June's been adopted by the LGBTQ plus community as Pride Month, according to CNN, an article I just read yesterday. Um, June is a month when the world's LGBTQ communities come together to celebrate the freedom to be themselves. The website goes on to explain pride gatherings are rooted in the arduous history of minority groups who've struggled for decades to overcome prejudice and be accepted for who they are. It's become a major campaign, and it's completely unavoidable. Just visit any Target, any supermarket, any retail store, and you can't miss the pride displays. The trans rights are human rights T-shirts for kids, onesies for babies with a rainbow flag and the letters PRIDE written large across them. My wife went to Starbucks yesterday, and on the top of her lid, they put a heart-shaped rainbow sticker. I was just in another coffee shop this morning, not even 2 hours ago, and they have, Pride Month drinks special for this month to celebrate Pride Month, and the celebration has entered many of the churches. It hasn't just stayed out in the culture. It's entered through the doors of the church, and actually entire denominations have now joined the chorus of the world and acknowledged June as Pride Month. As Christians, how do we respond to Pride Month and the ideologies behind it? This is the question that we're going to ask and answer today. This is To the Point, my bi-weekly video where we address culturally relevant topic from a distinctly Christian worldview. So let's dig in. But before we do that, I want to remind you to add your comments or your questions to the comments section in your window. And after about 10 or 15 minutes of kind of addressing this issue, I'd love to get to those. So let's dig in. We're going to jump in. The first step in responding biblically to Pride Month is to examine our own emotions, to evaluate the underlying values that are being pressed into by a certain event. In this case, the cultural celebration of something the Bible defines as sin. And my first principle here is really simple. Actually, everything I have to say today is simple. It just might be difficult. So I really have nothing profound to tell you. The first thing is to slow down. When something in the culture troubles us, we should avoid a knee-jerk reaction and examine our understanding of the event. This is true whether the troubling thing has to do with abortion, injustice, immigration, racism, or Pride Month. Paul says, "Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these things, the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. Therefore, do not be partakers with them." This is really important. Right? This is really important. We are not partakers with them. For you were formerly darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. So we once, when we put on the idea that we too were once sinners, this is where we start. Slow down. Let's think about the issues. Why are we having this reaction to them? And then also remember that that we too are sinners in desperate need of rescue. So anyways, keep going on. Walk as children of light is what Paul says. For the fruit of the light consists of all goodness and righteousness and truth. And this is going to be a theme that runs throughout my response here. Paul goes on to say, trying to learn what is pleasing to the Lord. In Romans, he says, we should all know this verse, right? Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect. Right. So instead of reacting rashly and running immediately to our social media outlets or any other outlet, we should ask ourselves if our understanding of the issue is correct, or are we leaning on straw men or a shallow understanding of the issue? Is our response more cultural, political than Christian? I bring this up because oftentimes when I'm scrolling through my social media threads, I see a lot of Christians responding to Pride Month, but I question, one, their motive. I question, two, are they actually taking time to really understand the issue, or is it a knee-jerk reaction and they're happy with posting pithy statements on social media, which we're going to get to, because guys, our priority is to, if we remember, is to live as children of light, which means allowing goodness, righteousness, and truth to guide our actions and our reactions. This means our response needs to be good, righteous, and true as well. These are important principles to remember. So now the question remains: how do we respond to Pride Month as children of light? What's the good, righteous, and true response to seeing sin celebrated all around us? To answer this important question, I think I'd like to ask a different question. Do you personally, and I asked this of myself as I was preparing for this live video, do I have LGBTQ plus people in our own life? I hope you do. And if you do, how do you describe them? I think this is an important question, because often our response to issues brought by something like Pride Month rests on a shallow description of the LGBTQ plus community as a whole. I say shallow because the response seems to be shaped by overviews and one-dimensional summaries instead of personal understanding and empathy. Shallow responses, guys, are the result of a lack of interaction and open dialogue with real people within real groups or real communities that we're seeking to address. And I'm being kind of hard on us on our end of the table right now, because I can't affect how somebody's going to respond to me. I can't affect that, but I can affect how I respond to somebody else. And then shallow responses, I think, are based on stereotypes. And then oftentimes I see the shallow responses posted on social media in the form of memes or whatnot, right? So shallow responses, they're based on stereotypes and are often a symptom of not being slow to speak. For example, we reduce people down to an ideology, like saying all queer people are committed to ridding the culture of cis heteronormativity. I don't know if that's true or not. I have queer friends who wouldn't agree with that. They don't want to rid the culture of anything. They're struggling with a real issue in their personal lives, and often the shallow response finds its expression in what I call cliches that kill. This is something I picked up from Alan Schleman a number of years ago. An example of a cliche that kills is when people say things like it's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, or homosexuality it's just a choice, so just don't choose it. Right. And as a result, we don't actually get to know the person. And without knowing the person, we can't love the person. If there's no love, then our message, even if it's the correct message, is just white noise. We all know this scripture too. This is Paul in Corinthians, right? If I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but do not have love, I've become a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and know all the mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith, so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing, is what Paul says. He goes on, and if I give all my possessions to feed the poor, and if I surrender my body to be burned, but do not have love, it profits me nothing. And on the other hand, guys, if we focus on developing deep relationships with people we disagree with, our responses will become multidimensional instead of one-dimensional, and they'll come from a place of love for the actual person. So you see what happens there when we form these relationships. What happens is we become engaged with a person, and we become loving of that person instead of just pressing against an ideology. We become for a person, and I think this is important. And then we also understand the context that they find themselves in a little bit better, and then that kind of presses into our own shallow understanding of maybe where they're coming from. You see, Jesus, he focused on developing deep relationships with sinners. If you think about it, right? Many of his harsh words were actually reserved for the religious establishment, who ignored or even shunned the cultural outcasts. And are we being like the religious establishment? Again, I'm being hard on us. I know I'm being hard on us up front, but I think it's worthy or good, I guess, to be hard on us, right? When we slow down and review our personal understanding of the issue here, Pride Month, and move toward the individual instead of offering pithy memes and Twitter responses, we see movement in the lives of the individual, which is gospel work. Remember, the gospel's relational, and God saves individuals, not movements. So social media comments, guys, let me remind you also, social media comments, that's not relationship. And it's not helpful to remain in our Christian bubbles complaining to each other about the sin of the world. At some point, we have to get outside of those comfortable circles and actually engage the people behind the issues we disagree with, which leads me to my next point. So slow down, develop a deep understanding of people behind the message. Now love them. This is my second point. Now love them. Jesus told us to love God and to love others. These are the two greatest commandments. Unfortunately, there's two ways people misunderstand what it means to love someone. First, many people think loving someone means affirming or accepting all that they do. According to a lot of people, those who don't affirm LGBTQ plus values and or celebrate Pride Month are unloving. Right? Taking it a step further, many people think if or just because someone speaks out against an ideology or construct in the culture, they're therefore not only unloving, but actually hateful. And this is just blatantly false. Total acceptance is not love. And just because someone speaks out against the idea or ideology or any other aspect of someone's life doesn't mean they hate the person. In many instances, total acceptance can be the opposite of love, and offering a critical word of encouragement or a critical word in general or advice is the loving thing to do. I have a perfect example from my own life. I used to be friends with a young lady who she had a best friend. And when I asked her, and I was an atheist at the time, I remember asking her, like, why are you friends with this girl? She seems to be getting you kind of in trouble all the time and supportive of like really awful behavior. And she said, I'm friends with her because she loves me no matter what I do. And she encouraged me in it. She supports me no matter what I do. And I remember thinking in my mind, even as an atheist, not even a Christian, I remember thinking, well, that's not loving because you're doing really harmful things to your own body and to the people around you. That's not love at all. So first, the first misunderstanding of love is it's not total acceptance. Second, loving someone's not, and this is the second misunderstanding, loving someone is not merely tolerating them. We don't tolerate someone we love. We might tolerate their ideas or behaviors, but we're called to love the person. This is genuine love that finds its beginning in the fact that every single person is made in the image of God. And for that reason and that reason alone, they're of infinite dignity and value and are worthy of being loved. Reminding ourselves of these things helps us have the right motivation or motive to confront the false and harmful ideas out in the culture. Lastly, with love as our motivation, so slow down, right? We want to slow down and get to know the people. We want to get to know the people so that we can love the people. And the last thing is with the love as our motivation, now we can confront the lies of the culture. You know, Paul says that let love be without hypocrisy. And then he goes on to say, so he's going to be talking about what it means to love somebody here in Romans, right? But then right in smack dab in the middle of this passage, he says this, he says, abhor what is evil, cling to what is good, be devoted to one another in brother love, give preference to one another in honor. The key concept of love is confronting evil. Love doesn't boast at all in anything, and it most certainly doesn't boast in evil. Sin is unacceptable to God, and therefore the Christian has to be responsible, has a deep responsibility to confront sin out in the culture, to confront evil out in the culture, always standing firm in the goodness, righteousness, and truth that I just talked about a few minutes ago. You see, Paul confronted the sexual sin of the Corinthian church. He said to them, love does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. You see, the loving thing to do is to hold fast to the truth, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. This includes our sexual identities and behaviors. And Tim Barnett, through Red Pen Logic, posted something just like, I just saw it on social media on Facebook right before I hopped on this video. And he said something, love does not celebrate sin. So love does not celebrate, gay pride. It does not attend gay pride parades. Love does not go into and support these types of things. That's not what love is. And I really want to be clear here because I started off tough on us, tough on the Christian, because I think it's important. I think oftentimes we get the issue right, but the way that we address it, or the tactic, I don't love. But I want to be clear. It is impossible, friends, it is impossible for the Christian to celebrate Pride Month. The Christian doesn't encourage aberrant sexual behavior. Any sexual identity outside the male-female paradigm is outside of God's plan for human flourishing. Any sexual activity outside of the context of one man, one woman for one lifetime is outside God's plan and designed for sex. These things are not good. They're not righteous, and they are not true. The Christian, he calls his neighbor to their true identity as image bearers. How do we confront the lies? We call people higher. We remind them of who they are. Basically, even before they're Christian, you are a bearer of God's image, and this isn't a popular message, and there's a price to pay for this message. But this is what Peter talks about when he talks about what it means to love. Peter says, therefore, since Christ is suffered in the flesh, listen, he's talking about Christ's sufferings. Arm yourself also with the same purpose, because he who has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin. He ceased from sin, so as to live the rest of the time in the flesh no longer for the lusts of men, but for the will of God. You know, Peter goes on to say that he says, beloved, he's talking to Christians, beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal among you, which comes upon you for your testing, as though some strange thing were happening to you. Don't be surprised by the suffering you're going through, is what he's saying. But to the degree that you share the suffering of Christ, keep on rejoicing. He says, rejoice in the suffering, because you're sharing in Christ's suffering, so that also at the revelation of his glory, you may rejoice with exultation. If you are reviled for the name of Christ, you are blessed, because the Spirit of God and of God, the glory of the Spirit of glory and of God rests on you. Notice, I want to point out something here, that if we're reviled for Christ, we want to make sure that we're actually reviled for Christ, not for something outside of Christ too. Just because you're getting pushback doesn't necessarily mean you're being Christ-like, and we want to put on Christ when we respond to these issues. So let me remind you guys, while the culture celebrates LGBTQ plus pride, remember to slow down, love your neighbor, and confront the lies while pointing people to the love of Christ. Get to know the people you disagree with. Copy Jesus, ask them to dinner, hang out with them, love them enough to share the truth with them while you're going bowling with them. Or another principle here, and I'm going to end on this and then see some comments and questions. Train your children up, guys. This is what we do with our kids. I believe the next generation is the most important generation, right? It's always the most important generation. So train your children up. Don't shelter them. Bring them to Target. See the displays. Bring them to Coffee Bean, Pete's Coffee, Starbucks Coffee. Bring them to these places and point out what the meaning is behind these things, and then why it's not right, it's not righteous, it's not true, it's not honorable. And then you're training the next generation to think like this, and this is how we affect the culture. So with that, guys, those are just a couple principles. Slow down, love them, and then confront the lies with the truth of who they are. And now I'm going to look down here at my monitor and scroll through and see what we got for comments. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I didn't say it up front. Normally I do, but hey, Levi, I think we did a podcast yesterday together, which was fantastic. Love is love. Dan Delane, love is love. Depends what you mean by love, right? Depends what you mean by love. That's how you respond to this. You know, I saw that t-shirt, love is love. I just saw they're selling these tote bags at Pete's Coffee. I don't know if you guys have Pete's Coffee, but they're selling these tote bags that says this on it. A good way to respond to somebody who is saying this is, what do you mean by love? Because if you mean love as in total acceptance, well, that's not love. Though sometimes it's not loving to encourage your friend to continue in their drug addiction, right? It's not loving to encourage your friends, somebody who's not her husband. That's not the loving thing to do. So it's not always total acceptance of their behavior. So it depends what they mean by love, and that's where we start with that. Love is love, not always, but good comment there. Thanks for tuning in, Dan. I appreciate it. God is love, Scott. Man, thanks for tuning in, bro. God is love. Love is defined by God and not by itself. That's right. Well, love is an attribute of God. So God is defined by his attributes, and he can't cease to be any of them. And God is love. So the very idea that we get from love comes from the very character of God. It's not so God couldn't change the definition of love, just like he can't change the definition of righteous behavior or what is just, right? These things are rooted in the very character of God. If you start changing the definition of what love is, you start changing the definition of God, and you no longer have God. So God being love means that love, the idea of love, is actually an objective moral principle. And it's something that exists. It looks a certain way, right? And and that's described in scripture. So yeah, so it's not defined by itself, and it's not up to the culture to define it, to define what love is either. That's the objective component. But thanks for tuning in, Scott. That's a good comment. Harmony's quoting me. That's cool. Let's see here. Hi, hey Kim. It's good to have you here. I'm so glad that you were able to join us. Thank you. I know these folks are believing a lie about who they are. If only they could grab hold of what Christ says about who they are. My issue is that children are being indoctrinated. Yeah, I'm struggling with this too, but I also see God moving and stirring in this because of, well, COVID had effect on this, but because a large component. The homeschool numbers in this country, I just read an article because we're going to start homeschooling our oldest daughter. All my kids go to a private classical Christian school. My daughter's going to the 7th grade. We just want to try homeschooling with her. We think it's the best option for her right now. And so I've been doing all this research on homeschooling, and the numbers have doubled in families that are doing homeschool in the last 3 years. One of the major contributing factors is COVID, but another major contributing factor, what I'm reading, are these radical ideologies that are being pressed in on our kids. So it's not even the conservative Christian or the conservative right, or however you want to describe it, that are feeling the effects of it and not liking it. There are a lot of people who don't agree with us along worldview lines that are saying enough is enough with this stuff. But you're absolutely right. There's an indoctrination that's happening. It is everywhere. I don't know if you guys remember, but it used to be the saying was what happens in my own bedroom is in my own bedroom. Why are you forcing your morals on me? Well, those days, I mean, the scales have completely flipped. This message of equity and inclusivity and LGBTQ pride are being rammed down our throat. And that's why it's important for us to be equipped and prepared. That's why it's important. These are the 3 principles, right, that I just talked about. That's why it's important for us to slow down and think introspectively, right? That's what Paul tells us to live vigilantly, for the days are particularly evil, is what he says. And what he's saying there is, he's saying that we want to live circumspectly. We want to be eyes wide open towards the world, and we want to be thoughtful not only about what's happening out there, but what's happening in our own hearts and in our own minds and our own souls. When we're confronted with the lies of the culture, when we're confronted with these things that are abhorrent. I mean, they are. I don't want to say offensive, because I think Christians should be the least offendable people on the planet. We've got Jesus Christ. So we should, it should be hard to offend us. But these ideas are really pressing in on our worldview, and we want to stop and slow down and kind of introspect and say, why am I feeling this way? Do I have an understanding of the issue? Do I understand the people behind the issue? And are my reactions knee-jerk, or am I actually thoughtful in my reactions? And then when we slow down, we're able to, it's amazing. We're able to respond, I think, much more effectively. And then we're not in these, I don't ever want to get in a battle of slogans, like throwing mud at each other, because you both just end up getting dirty. And that's not where, that's number one, we can't ever win, because the world can go places that we can't. And in that kind of game, we don't ever want to be vindictive, and we don't ever want to be cruel or harsh. So we want to, when we slow down and we think about the issues, we can actually bring a case and make that case out in the public sphere. And but we want to make sure that we're doing it from a right motive. And the why I bring this up is because as we become more introspective, and as we become more settled in understanding of, we're better able to teach our children who are being confronted with this stuff, or the trying to be indoctrinated. I think indoctrinated is the right word here. A few maybe months ago now, I spoke here on To the Point about LGBTQ plus issues. I forget what the video was titled, but the reason I did it is because I saw my kids used to watch Blue's Clues, and it's so interesting because this is a cartoon, guys. Like, I understand that, and the idea that I have to take this so seriously. It's a cartoon about a blue dog, and I think there's a pink dog now, and they like run around, and there's a guy in it, and it used to be a really great show. I used to really like it with watching with my, like, I mean, now 10 years ago with my oldest. But the idea that we actually have to confront this is kind of concerning to me, and that we have to take it so seriously. But we do, because this show they had a family pride parade where it was led by a drag queen, an animated drag queen, but a drag queen did the voiceover as well. So it was a depiction of this drag queen. And the families, it was families on these different floats in a parade. And they, a family of two dads and kids, a family of two moms and kids, a family with three dads, a family with two dads and one mom, a family with, a trans dad. And then the final float, and if I remember correctly, they didn't mention a normal family, a hetero family, a cisgendered, like, mom, dad, kids, and that's it. The last float had, and this is, again, I can't believe that we actually have to take this stuff seriously. It was an animated beaver that had chest scars from a double mastectomy. And the age group that this is geared toward is like 5 years old and younger. And I mean, if that's not indoctrination, I don't know what is. And it's sick. There's, it's not healthy. It's not good. It's not true. It's not righteous. And we need to be pushing back at this, but we do it from a proper motivation, and we do it in the right way. We don't just throw mud. But anyways, this is a great comment, Kim. I do get concerned for our kids. I pray a lot. That's something I didn't actually mention is prayer. So let's keep going here. Granny Sharp, it's good to have you here. Thanks for tuning in. My youngest son ostracized me from his life 4 years ago because I won't agree with his lifestyle. I never rejected him. I'm so sorry to hear that. That's hard. See, these are realities that we live in now. The rubber meets the road. It gets real quick. And, you just keep praying for him. Keep praying for him to know the truth. Keep praying for your relationship to be restored. Always seek to get an inroad, never turn your back, be there, make sure that he knows, however you can, if you're able, that you'll always be there. You'll always love him, no matter what his ideas are. So it's important to be able to have that conversation. We can't always, it sounds like you maybe weren't able to have this kind of conversation with him where you can explain, you can say, hey, I love you no matter what. I just disagree with what you're doing. And if you're able to explain it and say, well, this plays out in every area of life. I mean, raising kids. I mean, I don't agree with everything my kids do. I don't ever agree with everything my wife does, but I love them unconditionally. Like I always tell my kids, I'm going to love you no matter what decisions you make. I don't like them maybe. And so the little things that make sense, and that's not a problem. But when we start talking about sexuality issues, gender issues. And then what I think the problem is here, where the rub is that these things are identity issues. So, people, your grandson is most likely saying that he's identifying as X, Y, or Z. And that's where they're placing their value, their meaning, and their worth. And so when they get confronted with, no, that's not true, it's not just the ideology that we're confronting. It's deeper. It's deeper than that, because their very identity is tied to how they're identifying. And that can be hard. So anyways, I'm sorry to hear that, Granny Sharp. But at the same time, guys, I mean, we never sacrifice truth on the altar of relationship. And I know you think, like, as you're watching this is hard. This might be easy for me to say, well, no, my worldview has cost me some very dear, good relationships. And that's what we do. I mean, that's just the nature of it. And we trust God with that. So stay strong, Granny Sharp. Keep training your grandkids as much as you can. Keep in touch with your children as much as you can, and try to sow into them. So let's see here. All right, let's scroll down. Here we go. Yes. Diane, you're right. No, God did not intend for men to sleep with men. He did not make, when I don't know what that oopsie. Oh, he did not make a mistake when he created you the way he did. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a certain amount of grooming, I think, that's going on. Certainly when we're talking about, these drag queens and stuff presenting at libraries. My daughter loves to dance. She's 10. She loves to dance. And one of the issues that we're having with dance right now is they want her to wear makeup, and they want her to, well, actually, we're not confronted with scantily, like there's like these outfits, that show a lot of midriffs and stuff. Not yet, at least. But we're having a problem with that. And I don't allow my daughter to dress a certain way. Why would I want her? I wouldn't want her to be at a library to be read a story by a woman scantily clad. Why would we allow a man dressed as a woman, scantily clad woman, present anything to our children? Like, there's just something really wrong with this. And actually, it goes back to my comment before, where there's a lot of people who we disagree with on worldview lines who recognize this, and they're starting to speak out. So they recognize it. But yeah, it is evil. And yeah, we don't change the Bible, right? The Bible is God's word. It's the same yesterday, today, and it will be tomorrow. So yeah, thank you for watching, Diane. It's a good comment. Let's scroll down here. Life in tandem with Kim. Oh, this is Kim again. My experience has been that if I do not affirm the lifestyle, you kind of cut off there. Yeah, oftentimes that's what it's total affirmation and acceptance is kind of what's on the table now. Nothing less than that. And that's not always love, like I said in like the 10 or 15 minute little message that I shared with you guys. Let's look at the next comment here. Matt Craig. Hey, John, think about the Tampa Bay Rays players that aren't willing to wear pride gear. The culture's response has been very negative. I actually haven't seen anything about this. I'm like so far out of the loop with sports, but the players have been very grace-filled in there. Wow, I can't believe it. I'm going to look it up after this and take a look, Matt. Like, thanks for bringing this up. Like, I would love to see how they're responding to the criticism, but it's really cool that you see people kind of standing firm, because there's got to be a lot of pressure on these players. I mean, we saw it with all the Black Lives Matter stuff. I'm a soccer fan, so I watch soccer. That's my preferred sport. So, I mean, even now at English Premier League, they're still taking a knee before the game, which, I mean, that's another discussion, but it's just interesting how people kind of follow along. So anytime somebody's able to kind of speak their mind and kind of resist the authority that's there, it's kind of cool. So I'll take it. Tampa Bay Rays. I'll look them up, and they're resisting. That's great. Let's see here. Danielle, Jon Noyes counsel regarding exactly what love means. Yes. Love is not always acceptance. Love is sometimes saying hard things to people, confronting the lies in their lives, and standing firm with truth. The truth is always loving. And that's what we want to be. We just always want to chase truth, righteousness, and goodness. Yeah, this is a really good way to put this, actually, Nick. Thanks for adding this comment. You can say the right thing the wrong way. I always say I think that's a good way to say it. You can say the right thing the wrong way. Greg always says, in the context of sharing the gospel, he's like, the gospel is offensive enough. No need to add any offense to it. And we want to have that character component: knowledge, wisdom, and character, right? These are the three pillars to stand to reason. We always want to have that character component. We want make sure that we have an understanding that we're talking to immortal people here. These are mortal souls, all of them made in the image of God. And we want to, whatever it is that they're wrestling with or struggling with, we kind of want to enter into that struggle with them a little bit. That's what Jesus did. It seems like when I read the Gospels, that certainly seems to be what Jesus modeled. And not acceptance. That's not what I'm saying, but spending time and actually loving on people who maybe need to be loved the most. And so, yeah, you can say the right thing, but you can definitely say it the wrong way. I do this all the time, guys, to be honest with you. I'm kind of, people sometimes say I'm a bull in a china shop. It's like, that's just my tendency. I'm getting better at that. I'm working at that intentionally, trying to be a little bit more measured in my approach. And being mentored by Greg has really helped me with that, where, slow down. That's why my first principle here is always slow down. Whenever I seek to address hot button issues, guys, I think the first principle we need to do is look this way. We want to look this way. I want to make sure that what I'm saying is done out of a proper motive, a proper heart, and done rightly. Before we confront the lies, we love the people, and before we love the people, we slow down to examine our own selves to make sure that that we're doing things appropriate, and that we have appropriate understanding of actually what's going on. I mean, how many times this happens to me? Not all the time, but it used to happen all the time, where I would interject into a conversation, like something I think is a really good point, and it might be a really good point, but it's off point. It's a really good point, but it only it relates in a tertiary way, and it doesn't further the conversation at all. Where if I had just kind of slowed down, listened more, introspected more, sought to understand the person that I was talking with a little bit better, I would have had a better response, more on target. And that's one key point. I watched a TED talk recently on how to have good conversations, totally, non-Christian, but this woman, she spoke about how to have a good conversation. The number one thing she said is genuinely be interested in the person you're speaking with. And I think that's such great advice. So I'm trying to do that now and implement that in my life. Every time I have a conversation with someone, I'm actually trying to focus on that person and what they're saying. I'm listening to what they're saying, and I'm not just waiting to respond. And that's something I'm actually, again, trying to teach my kids, that you're not just waiting for your time to talk. Like, actually listen and process and be interested in the person you're talking to, even if it's an uninteresting topic or you don't even really want to be there. If you can shift your mind to be thinking about being interested in person, you every time you're going to gain from that. I just really thought that was a good point. I'm gonna keep scrolling down here. I don't think I'm missing any. My computer just jumped on me. So I said that right as I said that, the computer refreshed on me. So if I miss anything, you can say, okay, here we go. Let's see here. Nick, again, man, what do you mean by tolerance? Such a good question. Culture has redefined tolerance to be acceptance. Yeah, tolerance and love are interesting. They're not the same at all, but they go kind of hand in hand. And this principle is very similar here, because people will say that tolerance is total acceptance. So you don't tolerate something you agree with. You agree with it. I mean, tolerance, the very definition of tolerance is putting up with something you don't like. You tolerate pain. You tolerate discomfort. You don't tolerate pleasure. It just doesn't happen that way. You don't tolerate ideas that you hold. No, you agree with them. You hold them. So you don't tolerate them. And the same thing with love, right? You don't. Total acceptance isn't love. That's not what love is. So yeah, good point, Nick. Here's a question from Levi, man. Levi, you're doing great work, by the way. Defending Christianity, I think, is your podcast. I think that's it. We did a podcast yesterday morning together, and wonderful interview style. You do a great job, man. Thank you for having me on. How do we respond when someone acknowledges the unborn is a valuable human and that abortion is murder, but still says women should legally have the choice to abort? This is a great question. So I'm willing to take questions on any topic, guys. I'll be on, for another at least, let's say 20 minutes. I got to go at 1. So Levi, great question. what happens when you talk to somebody, they agree that the unborn is a valuable human being and abortion is murder, but they still think that a woman should have the choice to abort. Well, I do what you call trotting out the toddler. So I say, okay, could a mother, is it acceptable for a mother to kill her 2-year-old child? And most people will say no. Okay. Is it acceptable for a mother to kill her 6-month-old child? No. Is it acceptable for a mother to kill uh her child 30 seconds after birth? Why or why not? Most people will say no, that's murder. You can't do that. And now it's up to them to give you a justifiable reason why they're assigning enough value to protect the life of the newborn baby or the infant or the toddler, but not the baby or the fetus in the mother. So it's called trotting out the toddler because there's an inconsistency there, because it goes back to what we talked about yesterday on this podcast with Levi, was the SLED stuff. So size, level of development, environment, degree of dependency. These things do not assign value to a person, to a human being. And so this is normally where people will fall into. They'll say, well, it's because the baby's in the womb. Well, why does it matter where the baby is? That's the environment. Like, does my value wax and wane according to my current location? Right now, I'm actually in my garage. I built like a little studio thing here, and so when I go out that door right there, am I more or less valuable than I am in here? When I go into my car or into a store or into wherever, am I more or less valuable? Well, no. That's because value isn't dictated by our environment. Degree of dependency is the same thing. Is a newborn baby less valuable because they're dependent on their mother? Is somebody who got into a car accident, who has to be temporarily, their life has to be sustained by medical technology? Or what about somebody who has diabetes, or somebody who has to take, I'm an asthmatic, I take an inhaler every day. I'm dependent on these things. Am I less valuable because I'm dependent on these things? Well, of course not. So degree of dependency doesn't assign value. Size. I'm 6'3", 220 pounds. I'm a pretty big guy. I serve on the board of directors with Nick Vujicic at Life Without Limbs. He's a really good friend of mine. Nick has no arms and legs. I'm way bigger than Nick. Am I more or less is valuable than him? Is he less valuable because he's got no arms and legs? Of course he's not. So I mean, and there's another example of the degree of dependency. I mean, he's completely dependent on another human being to survive, right? So size doesn't assign value or worth. Level of development. I've got a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 9-year-old. You guys can pray for me, and a 5-year-old. All girls, and my wife. We're all, I mean, it's crazy. Somebody's always crying in my house. It's usually me. And anyways, so am I more or less valuable than my 12-year-old? Is my 12-year-old more valuable than my 5-year-old because she's more developed? Why or why not? Because I'd say no, and the reason why is because level of size or level of development or environment or degree of dependency does not assign value to a human being. There's only one thing that assigns value to a human being, and that is that they are made in the image of God. Outside of that objective standard, I don't see why we would think anybody is valuable. So anyways, to your point, that's how I address the issue. I would trot out the toddler. I'd point out the fact that size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency do not assign value. That an unborn human being is just as valuable as a newborn baby, an infant, a toddler, a teenager, a young adult, somebody in the prime of their life, or an aged person. So anyways, that's how I'd respond. I hope that helps. Levi, good question, man. Good question. Harmony. Let's see here. We've got Adam. We started to homeschool our son, who is 4, turning 5 soon. It's a little daunting. It's really daunting, Adam. I feel you. But feels like the only option to protect my kids from being indoctrinated by the secular worldview. I get asked oftentimes, I get asked like by a lot of people, and in the places I go and speak, I speak all over the country, all over the world now, because everything's opened up. Then, if I'm speaking, usually a lot of times I'm speaking on suicide. That's been a hot topic, and now it's starting to diversify, which is good. But when I speak on suicide, for some reason, people ask me during that talk or after that talk about how can we kind of push back at the things that are being taught in public school? Maybe because there's a correlation between bullying in public school, or being taught these aberrant, identities at public school, whatnot, that affects the mental states of kids, which maybe contributes to suicide. So anyways, they asked this question, and my response, if I'm being honest, is if we want to affect what's being taught in public schools, it's not through elections and stuff like this, guys. It's going to be, you got to pull your kids from public schools. That's the only way because every time a kid gets pulled, the school loses money. Money is where money talks. And so when you pull your kids from public school, they feel the hit monetarily, and then they're more apt, the school board is more apt to change its curriculum. So that's just, anyways, good job, man. Adam, fight that good fight, dude. It is daunting, dude. We are just now trying to figure it out. This is a recent decision for us. So we haven't even made any final decisions yet for next year. We're in the process of kind of scurrying around and figuring out what we want to do for curriculum and all that stuff. So it is a daunting process, but it's worth it. It's also, I feel like, closer to the biblical model. I mean, I think that I take the discipleship of my children very seriously. I am the primary discipler of my children. My children are not discipled by their teachers. They're not discipled. I mean, they contribute to their discipleship, but they're not discipled by their youth pastor. They don't even have a youth pastor. They go to the church that I started, that I pastor at, and we don't have a youth pastor. We don't have youth programming. So they're in church with us. And but it's not their response. It's not the youth pastor's responsibility to be discipling your kids. The youth pastor's responsibility is to be walking with you as you disciple your kids. So I take that very seriously. And that translates over into their education too. Like, I kind of want to take primary responsibility for my kids' education. That's the way it was at the private school my kids used to, or my oldest, and my three others go there still. But it's a partnership that I have with the school, but I'm the main teacher of my children. I want to be in charge of their education. And I take that seriously. So good job, Adam. And I know that not everybody can do it. I'm sympathetic there. My wife works out of the home. I work a lot. I'll travel a lot. So we're just trying to figure it out as we go. And we do the best that we can. So anyways, good job, Adam. All right, let's see. Sarah Johnson, thank you so much for watching here. I see many Christian parents who, upon realizing that the child is gay, abandon scripture authority for advocacy, and anyone who speaks truth, become an attacker. We have to get comfortable with knowing the truth, living it out graciously, communicating it lovingly, and still be called a jerk. Yeah. Guys, I am called names like you have no idea. Like, and I'm a pretty nice guy. Like, I just went to the University of California Irvine campus, UCI, and did some open air stuff with a video crew. It was really amazing. And some videos are going to be coming from that shortly. But talking, engaging students on worldview centered issues. I wasn't really pushing into them. I was just trying to ask questions, put stones in their shoes, and get them to think about stuff. But even there, you're called names, closed-minded, narrow-minded, bigoted, hateful, antiquated is one I get, or deluded is one I get a lot. You're deluded. It's like, okay, but again, it comes back to the fact that I have Christ, and then it comes back to Peter's words, right? So Peter tells us that we can celebrate as we're being kind of persecuted. I wouldn't say that I'm persecuted really in any way. I don't think persecution's really hit here. But we can celebrate in our tribulations and our trials that are brought as we preach Christ, because we know we're preaching Christ. So we need to be, and the way that you do this. So Sarah, you're hitting on a really good point here. Maybe I should do a to the point on this. We need to become resolute now that we're going to stand firm later. It starts now. We need to get in our minds that when things get really hard, when the culture really starts pushing in on us, and churches really start closing because of their ideologies they're preaching, and pastors are really going to prison, and these things are really happening, we need to be standing firm in the truth. But that doesn't start right while it's happening. That starts now. That starts years beforehand. We got to get in our minds that we're okay. We're well content with suffering, is what Paul says. We need to get that in our minds and kind of get used to that now while it's not happening, so that we'll be equipped and prepared for when it does happen. It's like anybody who does self-defense training, right? Sometimes people do self-defense training after they've been attacked or after their house has been broken into or whatnot. But it's best to do it before you get attacked or your house is broken into, so that you know how to react, and you practice it and you practice it and you practice it. Certainly, J. Warner Wallace would point out, shooting is a lot of it is muscle memory. You want to be if you want to be quick on the draw and you want to know how to react in certain circumstances, you need to practice, so that when the situation, if it ever comes up, you're well prepared to do it. And it's the same thing now as we enter kind of into the future. We want to become firm now, preparing ourselves for later. So anyways, it's a good point that you bring up, Sarah. That was kind of like related to your point. Let's see here. What else do I got? Hey, Natural Gee, I'm glad that you came back. Let's see here. Is that Giovanni? Nice to meet you, Giovanni. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for tuning in, dude. Homosexuality is a sin, just like any sin. How do you respond to people saying it's hate? Well, I I ask a question. What do you mean? One, how are you saying this? You want to make sure you're saying it winsomely and effectively. And if like you don't want to run into somebody who identify or says, a gay man and just call him, you're a sinner. That's not effective. But in the context of a conversation where you're discussing a biblical worldview of this stuff, and you say, hey, homosexual sex is a sin, and it's and they, oh, well, you're just a hater. I would ask, well, how is that? How am I hating you? Like right now, what's it mean to hate somebody? Well, you disagree with me. Well, does that mean you hate me? Because you're disagreeing with me right now. Does that mean you hate me? Are you a hater? So we're both haters, right? So you see how it falls apart pretty quickly. So that's how I respond. Just try to point these things out. I start with questions. I'll ask them, what do you mean by hate? What's it mean to hate something? Because I hate very few things, especially when you're talking about people, but I disagree with an awful lot. So if every time we disagree, it's hate, we are in a world of trouble. And that's not just the Christian, that's the non-Christian, that's everybody. We're in a world of trouble because dialogue will break down. And that's the problem with all of this hate stuff, because it's not meant to further the conversation. All it's meant to do is squash conversation. And it's meant to, oh man, what's the word? Push out ideas. It's meant to stifle ideas from entering into the cultural conversation. How do you do that? You just call somebody a name. You're a hater. It's like, oh, well, I don't know. Can we just talk about what the issue is? Can we talk about what I hate? Like what's that mean? I hate because I disagree with you because I think homosexuality is a sin. Well, can we just talk about what it means to be a sin and why it's a sin? Can we talk about why homosexuality is homosexual sex is harmful? Can we talk about, how it's not part of God's original design and how it doesn't promote human flourishing? Can we talk about that? Or do we just need to call each other names? And that's where I said before, like oftentimes in these conversations, we don't want to get in this throwing mud because we can't do it well enough because we're Christian. we don't do that. We don't call people names, Oh yeah, well, you're stupid and you're ugly and your mother knows it. We could respond like that, but then what's that do? No, what we do is we respond in kindness and out of love, and we try to further the conversation, but also further the relationship with the person and say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be hateful, but I'm a little confused. Could you tell me what you mean by hate? You see, that's Columbo right there. So that's how I would do it, Giovanni. That's how I would do it. Mike, the Lord completely delivered me from LGBT identity and same-sex desires 4 years ago after 35 years. Wow. Since you were 14 years old, as a club DJ and male stripper in the gay nightlife. This is not an easy sin to overcome. Hey, Mike, praise the Lord for you. I do. I praise God that He's gotten a hold of you. I'll pray for you tonight, man. I'll remember you and stay strong. And this happens a lot, guys. Beckett Cook. I don't know if you guys know who Beckett Cook is. Mike here's a great example of this. Thank you for sharing that, Mike. I really appreciate it. It's personal and sometimes can be hard. It has consequences too. I don't know if you guys know Christopher Yuan. These guys are like phenomenal, and it's crazy what God does to redeem people. Right? He makes beautiful things out of ashes, and it's really cool. Thank you for sharing that, Mike. I really appreciate it. God works. He does amazing things. Praise the Lord. Oh no! Every once in a while, my computer refreshes, and then I lose where I am in my comments. So I hope I don't miss anything. What are some good arguments against the phrase reproductive justice? I've seen this start to be the latest code word for pro-abortion. Yeah. What is justice? Let's talk about that. What's it mean? Reproductive justice for who? I mean, because there's two parties, well, at least two parties involved here, more if you count the doctor and the man. So there's the man, because it takes a man to make a baby, right? A man, there's a woman, there's a doctor, and there's an unborn child, a fetus, an embryo, however, whatever word you want to use to describe the unique living human being that's growing inside of the mother. Reproductive justice entails that something good, right, and true, right, is happening. That's what justice is. Justice is it needs to be defined a certain way. So that's what I would ask. I would ask them, what do you mean by justice? Like, justice for who? Because it's certainly not justice for the aborted baby. So that's how I'd respond. I always try to respond with questions, and actually asking what justice is a great way to get into that conversation. Because justice fundamentally, at the very basic level, justice is rendering what someone is due. So in the act of abortion, every single person that I know would agree with this. An abortion, an abortion is the intentional ending of a human life. Okay, that is just medical. That is agreed upon, right? It's the intentional taking of an innocent human life. How is that justice? Actually, that is the exact opposite of justice, according to our justice standards. Not just in Christendom, but across the board. That's called murder, right? So the taking of the intentional taking of taking the life of an innocent human being is murder, right? So that's justice. How is it not? How is abortion then justice? Because it seems like the same thing's happening here. It's the intentional taking of an innocent human being's life, and then that starts the conversation. So I mean, it could be a lot of things, but it can't be justice. Let's see here. I have time for like one more if I can get there. Let's see here. Let's see. Oh, you know what? Someone just mentioned, and my computer jumped again. Learn more about Becca Cook. Thanks for providing these links, Harmony. Right here. And I'm going to end on this because I got to get going, guys. You guys can pray for me. I'm traveling early, 3 a.m. to Georgia, I think. And I'm speaking on Friday and then flying home on Saturday night. And then we've got a lot of travel coming up. And anyways, I need to go pack. I'd recommend believers read Fox's Book of Martyrs. It really challenged me to consider what I would be willing to do. This, Adam, Right on. I used to keep an abridged version of Fox's Book of Martyrs in my bathroom at home, and just read like a little bit whenever I had the opportunity. It's a great resource, and it's insane, and it does get you kind of in that mindset. Are we willing to suffer? Because we haven't suffered. I mean, if I don't know where you're watching from, because you could be watching from anywhere. So maybe you are. I mean, if you're in Iran, you could possibly be suffering, or if you're in the Middle East somewhere. But most of us in the West, I mean, we haven't really suffered for our faith. But I do think it's kind of coming. Another great book is anything written by Carl Truman, and then Live Not by Lies by Rod Dreyer. Though that's a key book to read. You should definitely read it. So anyways, okay, with that, guys, I'm going to get going, but I wanted, before I go, number one, just thank you guys so much. You guys are the reason why I do these lives, is just to get the questions and kind of share just a piece of my mind with you. And you guys share a piece of yours with me. And I really do appreciate you guys tuning in. I want to recommend to you, if you want more resources on all this stuff, str.org. Of course, str.org has blogs on how to respond to Pride Month, how to discuss, different various objections having to do with the abortion discussion. I mean, we have so many resources at str.org. And one of the newest resources that we have is STR University. It's not a real university. Some atheist guys have kind of picked up on this, and they're like, it's not even a real university. Well, it's not meant to be a real university, guys. It's STRU. But